Yeah.
Seats for 3 weeks. No, you're telling me. I want to watch it. Maybe that much, but make some
Hello, how are you?
Vice chair, I think, right?
Why don't you guys come up?
I wasn't prepared to be on it. Was our camera to go up? I'm not pushing capacity right now. I would be my lap.
Sorry. So I'm dealing with Iris in the car. Okay. Oh.
So what are your chances of making this less than 2 hours? I have.
So we changed the nomenclature to education. So education represents 56% of the budget. And so those are just the budget breakdowns. As far as revenue, we look at our revenues. I'm going to talk a lot about revenues in a minute. 70.
Oh, that's right. Like,
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us here in the Great Hall on Friday, January 9th, 2026, for the meeting of the Plymouth Select Board. Pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, any person may make a video or audio recording of an open session of a meeting of the Plymouth Select Board after first notifying the chair, subject to the reasonable requirements of the chair, so as not to interfere with the conduct of the meeting. At the beginning of each meeting, the chair will inform attendees of any recordings. Presently, I'm only aware of a recording by the local scene. Is there anyone else recording? All right. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency and signed into law on March 28th, 2025, this meeting will be conducted via remote and in-person means. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so by tuning into the local scene government cable access channels, Comcast 9 and Verizon 47. They may watch the meeting as it's aired live or watch it on the local scene website. Members of the public who wish to participate in the meeting may also appear in person at the Great Hall here at Town Hall at 26 Court Street in Plymouth, or remotely by clicking on the link which is on our agenda and posted on the website. Please join the board in the pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first and only item on our agenda is the fiscal year 2027 budget discussion. We're going to be joined by Town Manager Derek Brindisi. I do want to note that we're also joined by the Finance Director, Lynn Barrett, and I've invited the Chairman of the Advisory and Finance Committee, Mr. Joe Lally, to join us as well. There are several members of the Advisory and Finance Committee who are in the audience, as well as some members of the public. Mr. Brindisi, I'll turn things over to you.
All right, great, thank you. So I don't want to go through the complete slide deck that I presented back in mid-December, but I did mention 2 weeks ago that there was I would say, a major change to our health insurance costs that I brought up 2 weeks ago, so I want to reflect those changes in tonight's presentation. So just as a recap, these are just some quick numbers just to refresh folks. You'll see that this year's budget, the general fund budget is about $308 million. Enterprise accounts for an additional $22 million for a total of $330,000. And then there are additional costs represented here on the cherry sheet assessments, so on and so forth. So we have a budget that we're talking about today. I'm going to get into the details in a minute, but this is kind of a 40,000 foot overview of about $343 million, which represents in total with schools and the town side, $16 million increase, almost 5% increase from last year. So again, just a quick recap, this is just a breakdown by department of the increases from last year. You can see only one Department of Planning and Development, actually had a decrease in their budget. The public safety departments had an increase in their budget of about 9%. That is primarily driven for the two new collective bargaining agreements of the two police unions. So I just want to mention this because I think it's real important that our departments, spend a lot of time looking at other sources of funding. So although comparatively speaking, on the town side, it looks like it's a small number, but we do contribute almost $2 million per year into the general operating budget to help subsidize our services. So I just, again, want to this is kind of where I've always focused my energy in the last 4 years in the presentation. It's really looking at new revenues and comparing our new revenues to those expenses. So when we first started to go through the budget process, like we always do, our finance director looks at property tax increases and what the new revenue will be there. And so you'll see right here, we had an increase of almost $9 million of property tax increases. We budgeted $3 million this year. And then we had a debt exclusion of $6.2 million. So those are the new revenues that we added. And then you'll see down here for local receipts, we budgeted, looks like it was $2.8 million in additional local receipts from last year. So for new revenues, at that first glance, we said, okay, we have about $11.5 million in new revenues for this coming year. And this is what we did in previous years. And then we would split this $11.5 million. 61% goes to the schools, 39% goes to the town, and then we go off and start to build our budgets. That being said, though, this year is a different year because when we started looking at our expenses, what we realized is that healthcare costs and pension were the two major drivers, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. So when we split those revenues, we split them 39-61, like I mentioned earlier. We had to add an additional from the levy, $1.6 million. That's this number right here. So in my first presentation, you may remember, I had recommended that we add an additional $1 million from the levy. But because there was a recalculation of our healthcare costs, it required us to increase that number by an additional $639,000. And then prior to that, in my first presentation, again, looking at the expenses, knowing that we needed to find additional revenue sources, we used the $500,000 from nuclear mitigation, the $500,000 from capital maintenance fund, which, that came from the general fund last year. What we're recommending this year that we continue to fund those two accounts, however, not using general fund dollars, but using free cash. So we took that $1 million and then we applied that to this year's budget, again, to help us balance the budget. And then again, because we still didn't have enough money, we decreased the roads budget. My original presentation was roads is $2.6 million. We reduced that by an additional $410,000. So you'll see on the revised budget that we have $410,000 from roads that we're going to apply to this year's budget. So in total, again, I'll recap, we went from $11.5 million from the original review of the revenues and needing $4.6 million to balance this year's budget. So the question is why? Why do we need an additional $3+ million to balance this year's budget? And it really comes down to health insurance. I've shared with the board and with others in this community, there's a report that's going around that healthcare costs are really driving the budgets for every municipality in Massachusetts. This is not a Plymouth problem. I can certainly say it's a Commonwealth of Massachusetts problem. Quite frankly, if I were to do research, I'm sure healthcare costs is becoming a national problem. And so, we need to think about how we rein in healthcare costs because I don't believe that we could sustain increases for a second straight year like we are sustaining this year. And so, some would argue, why are we hearing about this? Well, now is the time to hear about this, right? Because I'm forecasting a very bleak outcome in 18 months from now, right? So, if you look at a light, we have a yellow blinking light that's saying caution. Like you are approaching a danger zone and you need to start doing something about it now. And so we're able to get through this year's budget by some, like I said, using those other revenue sources. But again, I don't think we can continue that level of increases with healthcare costs. And so we're going to have to do something about that. So that being said, you'll see that the costs went up by $5.1 million on this number here. Fixed cost pensions went up almost 1.8, about $1.7 million. Again, and like I've said in the past, like these are bills that we have to pay. We don't negotiate our pension liability every year. We get a bill from the retirement board that says this is what you have to pay for your pension liability this year. So it went up by almost $1.8 million from last year. So those are the major budget drivers. So when you look at those two numbers collectively, you're looking at like $7 million out of a $14 million new revenues, right? So 50% of our new revenues are paying two line items. Let me say that again. So 50% of our new revenue of $14 million is covering just two of our line items. It's covering our health insurance and it's covering our pension. And then again, we get into the breakdown, we distribute those dollars, 6139, what's remaining, so that we can continue to operate. So this is just a side-by-side view of the original presentation. So you'll see here, we had health insurance costs at 4.4, and then a recalculation determined at 5.1. And I also want to say, since I'm going to pause for a minute and say, listen, this is a projection, right? Lynn has done this for the last 15 plus years, and so every year we project what we think it's going to be. So we're hopeful that it comes in at this number. We're hoping it doesn't come, above this number. I'm not optimistic that it'll come in less than that, but if there is some savings to be found, then that would be great as well. So, it's like state aid. We budgeted level funded budget from state aid. But we know that talking to state officials that the governor's budget isn't released until, the third or fourth week of January, right? So this is the problem, in my opinion, how Plymouth does business. We're forecasting what state aid is going to be or not be. We're forecasting what health insurance is going to be, just so we can hurry and pass a budget in early April. Most communities in Massachusetts that have town form of government, they're looking at their town meetings in mid-May. The reason they do that is because they have real numbers. Right now, everything we're doing is just a forecast of trends that we've seen in years previous. So it's definitely a time to think about when we have town meeting. I would recommend that we move town meeting to mid to late May so that we have real numbers that we can talk about. Most communities, they're not even talking about their budgets until the end of January. The governor will release her budget at the MMA conference in a few weeks. Maya, who's a major health insurance provider in Massachusetts, will release their premium rate increases also at the same conference. So again, those cities and towns that work with Maya, they'll have real numbers to work with when they build their budget. So those are the budget numbers. That was the change. That we'll get into the breakdown at the very end of the presentation. But we spent a lot of time about costs. The finance department, under Lynn's leadership, they've been putting together this document. This is a 2-page document, and it speaks to really just, we spend so much time focusing on the budget, we don't spend any time talking about services and the great work that's delivered by our departments year in and year out. So I just want to spend a few minutes talking about that. I did mention at the first presentation that, calls for service for the fire department, we haven't increased, the number of firefighters over this period of time all that much, but it's doubled. It's gone from 7,000 calls for service up to almost 14,000 calls for service in 1 year. The PD, I mentioned previously that you can see this, same time period over 10 years, that back in 2015, they had 31,000 calls for service, ballooned to 43,000, but it's still hovering at, 38,000 calls for service. Again, with what I would say, a diminishing police force. And so we're trying to fix that as well. But just some big data points. And again, I would encourage you, I don't think it's public yet, but this is the document that has been completed by the finance team. We'll put this on the town website soon enough so folks can see, how their tax dollars are being used by town government. But again, animal control, these are some numbers that came off of the sheet. They had 3,000 calls last year. They have 3 animal control officers. Public health division, very small division, 370 complaints. That requires multiple inspections, requires follow-up and court action. Our Center for Active Living delivered 46,000 meals last year. They had 58,000 visitors. The library had 198,000 visitors. 21,000 cards were issued to card holders. And the Recreation Division had over 9,000 visitors at the beaches last year. Public Works, they maintained 377 road miles, maintained 5,200 catch basins, 105 culverts, 22 cemeteries, which includes 137 burials, 856 cremations. They also maintain 5 beaches, 60 athletic fields and courts. They maintain 33 parks. They're also responsible for maintaining 150 vehicles, both town hall vehicles, DPW vehicles, and police cruisers. So other services, just worthy of noting, 3,700 public records requests were filed and filled by one individual. 1,700 complaints were filed through See-Click-Fix that all needed response. 800 death certificates, 1,300 birth certificates were all issued last year. 67,000 tax bills were issued and then collected. 76,000 motor vehicle bills were issued and collected. 8,700 beach stickers were issued. Department of Energy and Environment maintains over 1,500 acres of open space, and the Department of Inspection Services, with their team, conducted about 16,000 inspections last year. So those are just some really quick highlights, because I think it's important to note that although we have a large budget of $340 million, we deliver a lot of services with that budget. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but you probably can't see these numbers all that well. But if the board decides to proceed with this budget, the yellow column is what we'd be asking you to vote, the various articles, Article 7, 8, and 9, 10, 11, and 12. So pending any questions, I'm happy to answer any of those.
Thank you, Derek. Before I move on to questions from the board, I realized that I skipped over public comment. So I'm going to open things up for the public first, and then we'll come back to the board for questions. Mr. Lyden?
Thank you. Steve Lyden, Precinct 17. I've lived in Plymouth since 1978. Since 1978, I've seen this town grow. It's unbelievable how much this town has grown. But you know what hasn't grown? And that's our departments. And I can't say I've dealt with just about every department, and I can tell you that our work is give 100, 200%. And I'm glad that, I don't think the residents realize or see all the, or understand the workload that our employees have. I think, we have a great bunch of employees, and, living in any town's not cheap. My oil bill goes up, everything goes up, taxes are gonna go up. But when you see where our taxes are going, I think we get a pretty good deal for the buck. And yeah, we have a shortfall this year, it was a glitch or whatever, but, it happens. We have to pay our health insurance, we have to pay our unions, we have to pay our bills. But, I don't think this budget is out of whack, or I don't see much, fluff in this budget at all. And I appreciate, Mrs. Rambisi and the Finance Committee for what they've done. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments in the room? Is there anyone online? Going once, going twice? All right, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the board. Mr. Canty?
So thank you, Mr. Brindisi, and for the overview and the updates. So first and foremost, while we have yourself and Lynn Barrett here, Director of Finance, obviously between our first presentation on this and now, we've had the revelation of the shortfall, the $1.1 million deficit between what we originally anticipated we were dealing with and what we are actually dealing with. Or when I say actually, it is still a projection, so there are some uncertainties to it. But based on our best calculations, that's what we think the reality is going to be. So Lynn, could you speak about that differential between the original forecast and the 1.1 and what that, how we discovered that, what that's based upon, and expand more on some of the reaction that the town is recommending that the board take in response to that?
Sure. So just to step back, we start building the budget in October. So the numbers that I start looking at right off the bat at the very beginning are our fixed costs. So health insurance, pensions, workers' comp, other insurances. We start looking at those things. So we're projecting in October, November timeframe what those numbers are going to be like in fiscal 27, starting July 1st of 26. When I look at health insurance, because we're self-insured for most of our health insurance, we have to look at claims. And when you look at claims, I'm looking at historical claims. So in October, the historical claims that we have are for the previous months in fiscal 26 and fiscal 25, 24. So, and also the other thing that we look at with regards to health insurance is because we're self-insured, we have a balance in our trust fund. So at June 30th, we had a balance in our trust fund of over $12 million, which is a very healthy trust fund for Plymouth, because at the time, our average monthly claims was probably between $3.5 million and $4 million. So in October, we're starting this fiscal year, July, August, September, and we're starting to get claims for this year for our health insurance. And those claims, those monthly claims, claims administration are spiking significantly. So upwards to almost $5 million a month, okay? So that's when putting together the health insurance budget initially to cover then costing out those claims for the next 12 months through June 30th of 2026, and then estimating what those claims are going to be for the following fiscal year, fiscal 27, because that's the year that we have to cover. What I'm seeing is a drawdown in the trust fund of the balance that we have because of this year's claims. So we need to up the premiums for health insurance for the town, the employer, and for the employee and the retiree. So we're looking at like 14% increase in those premiums to deposit into the trust fund so that we can pay those claims that are estimated to be, going out. I work with our health insurance consultant when predicting what those claims can be. So I'm not doing it on my own. But this year specifically has been a very high year. And what we're seeing is it's sort of all over the place. It's not specific individuals with high claims so that our stop loss insurance is going to kick in and we'll get some reimbursements. It's really all over the place. So that's a concern. And if you have a deficit in your trust fund at the end of any fiscal year, Department of Revenue requires you to raise it on your recap in the following year. So you have to raise that deficit through your tax levy the following year. So we always try to make sure that we have a balance in that trust fund to cover the incurred but not reported, the IBNR, and have a couple of months of cushion. So over the years, that's what we've always done. But this year it is especially concerning to me because the balance has dropped so much because of those high claims. So initially that budget went up 5.1 million based on that 14% increase. And we presented that number back in December. The next day, at the same time, so our retirees are on, they're on Medicare. We do Part D through a PDP product through Blue Cross. Those rates for Managed Blue and MedX are a rate that increases January 1st of a calendar year. It's not a fiscal year. I was updating in December because we pay a month in advance for those, we withhold a month in advance from retirees their premium for the following month's bill. So the following month's bill was going to increase because the insurance premiums were going to increase. When I went in to update those rates, I looked at the rates that we had set with Blue Cross, and the rates were accurate, that rates were increasing. But I went back and looked at my budget, and the rates weren't, the base rate that I used for the increase for 27 was the 1/1/25 Medicare rate and not the 1/1/26 Medicare rate. And those rates had increased by over 12 and 13% between Managed Blue and Medics. So I called Derek immediately and I said, when I ran through the numbers using the correct base rate, the budget increased $1.1 million because I'm estimating again another 13 to 14% increase next year. I was horrified, to say the least, and very embarrassed, but that's the reality of what happened.
Well, thank you for the explanation, Lynn. It's very detailed, and I appreciate the transparency. I know I've worked with you for a number of years, and I know you take your job very seriously, so I can only imagine how you felt realizing you put in last year's data in that particular line item. So I work in a different profession, but when you make a mistake like that, I can understand how that feels. So I'm sympathetic to that. In terms of the trust fund, my understanding of that, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it like how if I have a mortgage and I'm putting money in escrow and they're paying my taxes out of escrow? So we're not paying the insurance bills directly to the carriers. We're putting it in the trust fund and it comes out of the
Right.
trust fund?
Yeah, so we're self-insured, so we pay actual claims.
Okay.
So we also purchase a stop-loss insurance policy
Yeah.
to cover claims that exceed a certain limit. So our stop-loss policy covers the first $225,000. Well, we have to cover the first $225,000 worth of claims per person. Anything over the 225, the stop-loss insurance will cover.
Okay.
So if someone has an extraordinary, heart transplant or, things like that,
Sure.
we're covering ourselves for those excessive costs. So if any individual goes over that 225, the stop-loss insurance will kick in and we'll get reimbursed. The other thing that we have is what they call a $400,000 corridor, which is like a group limit. So if we have to pay the first, 400,000 kind of thing, and that it's all a formula. I'm not necessarily sure exactly how it works, but we
Sure.
do insure ourselves for any excessive claims. So we pay out of the trust fund.
Right.
The cost of that stop-loss policy, which is over $2 million a year. It's a per subscriber rate for individual and a family. So we pay that out of the trust fund. We pay actual claims out of the trust fund. We pay the administrative fee out of the trust fund. Blue Cross administers the program. So we pay the administrative fee, and we pay other Affordable Care Act fees out of the trust fund. We pay our consultant out of the trust fund. So all those costs come out of the trust fund. So when we go to determine what the rate we're going to charge everybody is, we sit with the insurance consultant, we sit with Blue Cross, because all the products that we have are through Blue Cross, and we come up with like a working rate of what we think that rate should be to cover all of those costs and to provide a balance in the trust fund so that we can cover any costs that are incurred but not reported and to have a little bit of a cushion.
Okay.
So that's how the trust fund works. And then, so the budget on the town side is the estimated premium that we are going to charge the employer. So it's whatever the percentage is. So for active employees, it's the 70%
Right.
is the employer share, and then the retirees is
A different.
various percentages, yes.
Right. And so we're we're paying out of the trust fund and we're charging into it to replenish it.
Yep, so every time we run a payroll,
Yep,
we withhold the employee share out of their, as a deduction. And at the same time, we charge the town their share. We produce like a check, and then we deposit that check into the trust fund.
okay,
We do the same thing with the retirees. The retirees get paid monthly. They get withheld from their retiree checks, their portion.
right,
And then monthly, we do a transfer of what the employer share is for the retirees into the trust fund.
okay. And you mentioned like that a big driver of the increase in money coming out of the trust fund was the spikes in health insurance claims recently. And I know we previously talked at the prior presentation about one of the drivers was that particular drug, GLP-1. Is that what we're talking about when we mention that? Or are there other specific drivers since July 1st that have been?
I think that's one of several things that are happening in the healthcare world.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so and in terms of our health insurance rate, we get notified annually about those increases in the November timeframe?
So we pay claims every month. So we
Right.
pay, on an annual basis, we sit with Blue Cross, we do a renewal. And they estimate so we pay monthly to Blue Cross, like an estimate of what they think our claims are gonna be. So we pay them, it's like about $4.5 million, something like that. $4.5 to $5 million a month, we pay them. Then they pay all of our actual claims out of that. And then they send us at the end of every month, they'll send us an adjustment. Either you've paid us too much and we're gonna give this back to you, or apply this to the following month. Or you haven't paid enough and you owe us money. So the claims, we get reports every month of what the claims are.
Okay. And what about notification of the premium increases? Is that we get that annually?
Yeah, and that's done in February. So we haven't done that yet for next year. So this right now is an estimate
Okay.
of what myself and the insurance consultant think it's going to be for fiscal '27. A 14% increase, which then correlates to the increase in the budget that we calculated.
Okay. All right. And then in terms of other cost drivers, so health insurance is a big part of it. And I know they're spread throughout the document in the various departments, but obviously we're dealing with, over the last several years, significant inflationary pressures that are driving up, I would imagine, significantly things like supplies and materials, contracted services that are new contracts, and then other costs that are related to either directly or indirectly to covering the cost of inflation and the pressures caused by that in the greater economy and the greater world. Do you have any estimates on, it may be hard to answer this question, but like what we are seeing for increases in supplies and materials overall on average, and those contracted services on average versus prior years?
So, what I can say is, in working with the health insurance consultant and looking at the claims and the increase month to month in those claims, we estimated out a 10% increase in claims over last year.
Yep.
That's what we estimated was, and she, at the time, back in October when I was doing this, that was a good number to use, because that's what we were seeing was a 10% increase. So we used a 10% increase based on 25 claims, and then I extrapolated that again for another 10% increase in claims for fiscal '27. We estimated a 3% increase in the admin fee, We estimated a 20% increase in the stop loss. I always estimate a very conservative number in the stop loss because we have to put the stop loss out to bid. And based on our experience, if we have like a lot of bad claims, sometimes they don't want to bid on it. Or if they do bid on it, it's very expensive. Sometimes we're able to negotiate that down, but like this year, fiscal '26, the premium for stop loss is about $2.6 million
Yeah,
for that coverage. So next year, we're estimating 3.1.
okay. Okay. Do we know, I know in prior years, we've talked about this as part of the budgetary cycle, but what is the average household value in Plymouth right now?
615, it's on that tax flyer, 615,000, I believe. 615, yeah. It is 615,994. It's on page 2 at the top of the flyer.
Okay. And the average tax bill?
Average tax bill is $7,730.73.
And do we, if this budget is passed as presented, do we have an estimate on the increase year over year to the average tax bill? In terms of not a percentage, but in terms of a dollar at the current tax rate?
The tax levy would increase, it's about 4.3% increase in the tax levy. So it's hard to say what that average tax bill would be because the values will change.
Right.
But with the tax levy going up to 615, I'm sorry, going up 4.3%, it's an increase of about $325 to the average tax bill if there was no change in their value, if their value didn't,
Right,
increase.
right. But that's an important point because values change over the year.
Yeah, usually values go up and the tax rate will go down.
Right.
But
and
the
that's-
levy's gonna go up, the 4.3.
And we set the tax rate towards the end of the calendar year.
Yep,
And the last couple of years, it has gone down, even though the overall tax bill has, tax accumulated from the community has gone up. The
right.
budget has gone up, but the tax rate per thousand has gone down as values increase to make up that difference.
Yeah.
And then this could be for you or it could be for Mr. Brindisi, but Mr. Brindisi mentioned the town meeting cycle and state aid, which, you know, I know what you're talking about, but I just think it's important to highlight that our town meeting is earlier than many other communities.
That's right.
And the town is functioning partially on unknowns about what money is going to come from the state, which shares our fiscal year. And if everything goes according to plan up on Beacon Hill, they'll have a budget in place for July 1st by July 1st. But there have been years where that has not been accomplished. And they often don't know the final state aid number until close to or shortly thereafter, sometimes, July 1st. Fair to say?
Yeah, that's fair. Like I mentioned earlier, the governor releases her budget usually the third to fourth week of January.
Right,
And then she sends that to the legislature.
right.
You know, and that goes to both sides of the legislature, as you know.
So House and Senate,
And through various committees.
right,
And typically what we have noticed is that by the time they're done with their work and they send a revised budget back to the governor for final approval, July 1st would be great, but typically we see it August, maybe even early
Yep.
September.
right. And so, and I think it was last year, but last year, the governor's if I'm getting my years correct, last year, the governor's recommendation for state aid wasn't that great. But then when it worked its way through the legislature, the picture got better, right?
That's correct. Yeah, I have to double check the governor's budget. I want to say last year, the net new state aid was about $300,000. additional to the previous year. By the time it got through the legislature, it amounted to be $2.5 million. And that $2.5 million, we, as you all know, we split with the schools appropriately. $1 million went back to the town and $1.5 million went back to the schools.
Okay.
So historically, the legislature has done a better job of fueling state aid for cities and towns. Not so optimistic this year.
But we should, takeaway would be, we should advocate through our state delegation to do what we can in regards to state aid, because even regardless of what the budget from the governor is, there's another couple of sets of teeth taking a bite at that apple.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cohen?
First, thank you very much for the presentation from the town manager, and again, from Lynn, your detailed explanation of the calculation. As of many of us, we've worked with you for many, many years and hold you in the highest regards and your ability to communicate and handle your department in the way you do. So I thank you for the transparency and the explanation, as you're famous for explaining very clearly. And often people say, success has 1,000 fathers and an error is an orphan. So I like the fact that you explained that to me. Along the way, you gave me a great deal of information of how this process is built, which takes me back further to, yes, we're going to talk about the shortfall today and how we might look at different revenue sources to mitigate that. But I do, it has forced me over the last, since receiving the budget, to really investigate, how does the budget get built? And obviously earlier in some of the presentations, the town manager indicated that they were hearing as early as March that the GLP-1 was coming in higher than expected. So we were getting some flashing on the dashboard as early as March. And later again, I believe there might have been, Blue Cross might have been putting out more information as late as June. And you indicated that the fiscal year obviously starts in July. Around October, you start to project out a year for the coming budget, and you start building it. I know there's a lot of deadlines that, having worked with your office, there's all sorts of state deadlines at different times of the year and reporting, but it might be something, as Kevin is indicating, how the state budget builds a budget and lets us know about state and local aid later in the year. We might start this process a little earlier, the budget building process, as we get into July, start to take into account these early notifications that are out there that costs are going up. I know it's a very, very busy time of the year, July 1st. And you start looking at the budget for the following fiscal year in October. If we moved it up, I know that you rely greatly on your department heads to start providing information for the next projected fiscal year budget as you work on it. So sometimes going through this process, I think that we need to give our staff and the resources necessary, but also give them the necessary time. So I look at that budget building process probably should begin further, earlier. And obviously, by the time the select board gets a copy of this around the holidays, and we're getting through that busy time of the year and into January, required to take votes to accommodate the FinCom that has to accommodate town meeting in April. Maybe why are we so tight on that schedule? Why are we not looking at a town meeting that is bumped out a little to give us more time to discuss the budget as a select board and as a finance committee? Because we're all trying to do everything to accommodate what this incoming state and local aid might look like coming in from the Commonwealth, and they're not going to know those numbers until later in June. There have been times where we've been forced to have a second spring town meeting later in June to accommodate some new news that's coming in from the state. So I think it's time that we look at the schedule between, where we place our town meeting in relationship to what the state is telling us. Why are we rushing this process when we should spend more time building and discussing as the state comes forward? I'm sorry, am I making?
No.
Okay.
I'm agreeing with you.
Oh, okay. So, you know, so obviously we have something we have to deal with immediately, but this situation has required me to kind of look to see how we got where we are and how we might improve that in the near future when we go to build the budget in 28, because building a budget in 28 is going to be a challenge, obviously. So I look forward to my other board members and what they have to say, so I'll relinquish my mic here.
Mr. Quinto?
Yeah, Bill, I totally agree with you that we should visit a later town meeting. So the town itself could prepare these budgets, you know, with more accurate numbers. Lynn, I just want to echo what Bill and Kevin said, that, you know, we all make mistakes. You know, I've been working with you for a number of years, and, you know, it happens. So, I mean, let's move on. You said what it was, and with that being said, though, I do have a question. The GLP-1 shot is being discontinued by Blue Cross on, I think it's July 1st. So that being said, and without digging through the information, if it's a 14% increase, do you know what the number would be, or could you find out what the actual increase would be if this was to be gone?
So the 14%, it's my understanding, and we'll get more verification in February when we sit with the Blue Cross and do the renewal, and with the health insurance consultant, but I've been communicating with her on almost a daily basis now. The 14% is really to replenish the trust fund after this year,
To dump
because
down to
it's
3
being
million.
drawn down so much. So I can't say with any assurance that because we're dropping the GLP-1s, that it's gonna cost, you know, 7% instead of 14%. You know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
the 14% is to try to get that trust fund back up to a sufficient balance and also pay claims. So it's really sort of like a month-to-month kind of thing that, you know, we look at as we go along. If I could just share with you, I did get some information from the health insurance consultant, because I was like, is this just the GLP-1s that
Right.
is affecting us this
That's
year?
really what I'm really asking.
Because I was like, it seems like it's so much more than that, you know? So I'll just share the email that she sent with us. She said GLP-1s is part of what's going on, but she said we're experiencing the perfect storm of healthcare costs right now. The following information is on increases we are currently experiencing. The Massachusetts healthcare system faces many challenges. Numerous dynamics are influencing affordability, spending, and access as follows. Insurer consolidations are limiting market options for employers. New Mass Health supplemental payments are driving up spending. Acute hospital operating margin growth and administrative expenses are straining health system budgets. Hospitals are experiencing high workforce shortages, including nurses, doctors, and administrative staff, which limits access to care. Providers are demanding higher prices in insurance negotiations. Mergers and acquisitions among hospital and provider groups are limiting competition and monopolizing market prices. Premiums and member cost sharing are outpacing wages and salaries. Financial troubles seen across health systems like Stewart have raised concerns about potential hospital closures and access to care. As a result of these market dynamics, family health insurance rates in Massachusetts are now among the second highest in the United States, and nearly half of all residents are having difficulty affording care. Healthcare is experiencing unprecedented costs simultaneously with surging medical expenses, inflation, and pharmaceutical spending, contributing to unsustainable rate increases. These trends are impacting nearly all employers and members across the Commonwealth. Maya and other health groups did share with us that their premium increases are well over 15% to over 20%. So that's what they've shared with us. So ours, again, we're estimating 14%, and we're hoping that it's not going to be anything more than that, but that's where we are.
Okay, well, maybe the next meeting we can, the next time you just have a conversation, I don't know if they can pull that information out, but they should be able to tell us what we actually spent, on just the.
The GLP-1s?
Yeah.
I have that information. I do have that. I can share that with you.
Okay.
If you just give me a second. You could ask another question or talk about something else until I get there.
I'm gonna let Mr. Canty talk about the annual town meeting language.
Yes, I agree that having a later town meeting would be beneficial, but we are constrained by, there's language in the charter as well as in the bylaws. The charter allows for the spring town meeting, it has to be somewhere in March through April, but a specific time set by bylaw. And 173, section 3 of the town's general bylaw says, the town meeting shall meet annually on the first Saturday in April and at such other times as may be determined by a vote of the town meeting. Now, we obviously moved this April because of Easter weekend, so we could move it to the end of April. That's the latest we could go. Even if we were to change the charter, unless we change when our election is, obviously we need to have it before the election so that we have a slate of informed town meeting members voting on it. But those are the meets and bounds of what we're dealing with.
I was just indicating that we should begin the process of reviewing that, our
Yes.
bylaws, our charter, our elections.
Yes.
So that we get in sync financially with the state in their decisions and our decisions and giving us the adequate time. There might be time to build into it, but you do have to pay attention to the election.
Right.
To these holidays, and to the charter and the bylaw, but it's going to require us to kind of roll up our sleeves and look at that.
Yes, I think pushing it farther back in April may be a good first step. It's something we can do with the current.
I do know it comes in the charter, and we're always reviewing the charter, and there seems to be enough arguing over foolishness than the things that actually benefit the town. So there you go.
So I have those numbers. Fiscal '24, we had spent, and this is just for obesity, weight loss. It's not for diabetes, because
Right.
Blue Cross is not dropping the GLP-1s for diabetes.
Right.
So this is, we spent 209,000 on 80 claimants or 80 subscribers. In fiscal '25, we spent 424,000 for 149 claimants. Fiscal '25, we spent 1,234,000 for 317 claimants. And so far this fiscal year, we've spent 1,394,000 in 5 months for 339 claimants. And when you extrapolate that for 12 months, that's 3.3 million versus last fiscal year was 1.2.
So 3.3 million is the number just for the ones that are not diabetes related?
Right,
There's over 300 people, I believe, on that.
339.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's an increase to 3.3 from 1.2.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm all set.
Ms. Iaquinto?
Thank you, Lynn and Derek, for the information that you just shared with us. I know we're spending a lot of time on healthcare, and there are other drivers of the budget too, but I did want to just stick on healthcare just for a minute or two, just to clarify a couple of things. So I think we learned of our healthcare rate increase in November. Is that right?
That is the budgeted increase, an
Okay.
estimated increase in premiums, which in turn would increase the budget.
Okay,
And it came in November, October, November, because that's when we do the budget.
right. And that's when we realized that we had this unexpected
When I started
increase.
to look
Yeah.
at those monthly claims to
Okay.
determine what we needed to replenish the trust fund, yeah.
And historically, we were able to rely on an annual 10% increase. That was the assumption.
Yeah, it was
Year over
actually less,
year.
I mean, we had built up the trust fund to a sufficient balance that we were able the last few years to have increases of like 4 or 5% in premiums. I do have that information, but I can share that with you. So we, on average, over the last 10 years, on average, the increase in health insurance has been just over 6%
Okay,
in premiums,
okay, so this,
on average.
so it more than doubled.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And it looks like from all the reports that I've read, because I'm a bit of a benefits geek, that the double-digit trends are just going to continue across the Commonwealth, not just for Plymouth. So that is definitely something we need to get a handle on. The other thing that you mentioned, I just wanted to make sure that I heard this correctly, that there will be additional conversations about rate increases in February. Did I get that
So
right?
February is when we sit with Blue Cross and we go over our renewal.
Okay,
So Blue Cross, and when we have those meetings with them, normally the budget increase that we're estimating is, works out fine. My only concern is because of this monthly trend, increasing, that when we sit with them, they may say, oh, I don't know if that's gonna be enough, kind of thing. When the numbers that I'm tracking right now, over the next 2 years, if we do the 14% increase, would basically decrease our health insurance trust fund down to around $6 million from 12 million. So that's just using the 14% increase. Now, and it is what it is, if it's any more than that, obviously, that's not good, but, I'm hoping that, when we met with them, we belong to this rebate program on our pharmaceutical, which started this fiscal year, but those reimbursements haven't started yet. They're supposed to start, this quarter, like the last 6 months of this fiscal year. Those reimbursements are gonna start kicking in. So I haven't seen what that looks like yet. So we're hoping that those reimbursements are gonna come in. We're gonna stop covering the GLP-1s next year, so maybe the trust fund balance would, go back up a little bit more. But those were just risks that I think we were sort of willing to take right now by just estimating a premium increase of 14%.
okay. And the healthcare is driven by market trends, more so, as opposed to like a pension liability. It's not really dependent on market trends. That's just an actuarial
Right.
calculation
Right.
and it will go up. Predictably, it goes up every year. So that's like a structural cost increase that we
Yeah.
see every year
On
that
the pension
automatically.
system, we estimate an 8% increase on the pension
Okay.
contribution every year. That's something that the retirement board has done for like the last 20 years. And primarily, that is due to pay off the unfunded liability, which is part of the pension system. And that liability is estimated to be paid off by the year 2035. And then after that, the budget will go down dramatically, and that's in our financial policy. At that time, we're recommending to take that money or that difference and put it towards the OPEB trust fund.
Okay, so that's much more predictable.
Yes.
Certain, I should say. So there's still a lot of uncertainty around the healthcare costs and what will ultimately end up, where we'll land with it this year. But I'm also thinking about some of the other structural cost increases that we have, those recurring costs that go up automatically every year, but we have no choice but to pay them, like unfunded mandates around special education costs, things like that, inflation, other contracts that we have to deal with. Do we have a sense, outside of the healthcare area, if there are any significant unexpected cost increases being driven by, the market influence on any of those things?
I know the school transportation, they just actually put that out to bid, so they have some information
Okay.
for the following fiscal years. I don't think it was as good as they had hoped, I also think that might be market driven too, because there's only so many providers that
Right.
provide school transportation and want to get into that. Special ed, as always, is a significant cost. And I think the school does an amazing job to try to keep as many in-house as they can. But, and like on the town side, the things I can think of are like our contractual agreements with some of our vendors, you know, what I mean, there's usually sometimes 3 to 5% increase, you know, every year on those. And we put those out, we do 3-year contracts for some of like the trade contracts, but everything we put out to bid, you know, and we're always either using the state contract or, you know, the lowest bid price, you know, so I mean, we're constantly looking at that to try to make sure that we're saving as much of taxpayers' dollars as we can.
Okay. Yeah, no, I know these decisions are made very thoughtfully, but my concern is that there's so much uncertainty around some of these costs since they are market driven and no one can predict where they'll actually go month over month, really. And our revenues are obviously not growing as fast as the cost increases. So are we confident that the budget that we're looking at now is going to cover all of this uncertainty and we'll be able to manage everything we need to manage based on what you put forth here?
I think this budget proposal is balanced.
Okay.
And, you know,
Even anticipating any unexpected,
yeah, I think we'll be fine because
surprises.
we do a good job in our financial policy with regards to free cash. We set aside some, you know, just to sort of roll over into the following year, but that's like, you know, just in case if we need to do, you know, get to that, we can.
Okay, so we do have that cushion
Yeah.
for any sort of really unexpected financial crisis. Okay, okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask if anybody from the audience wants to speak on this?
Come on up, Mr. Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, my name is Dale Weber. Tonight, I'm appearing to you as an active member of the Insurance Advisory Committee Technical Committee. I was a past chairman of that committee for over 30 years. And so I have some history and some knowledge on this subject that we're bantering about today. I want to say to you that I got here a little late, so I might have missed the slide on health insurance that has been shown a few times and has gone around town. And on that, there are some recommendations from the town manager. And I want to say that, so that for the board's edification, we have a home rule petition that addresses retiree health insurance. We've had that since 2003. And that was brought in during a fiscal crisis that we were having in 2003. And the employee groups stepped up and brought in approximately $4 million that year. And built in a financial model that each and every year after that, those savings would compound. And I'm going to give you a couple numbers here, and I'm happy that Lynn's here because I'd like her opinion on the numbers that I give you from memory. I don't have the docket in front of me, but I have a pretty good memory on all this insurance stuff that we've done. And I'm going to say that the cost avoidances and things that we have as employee groups stepped up to help the tax base and the cash flow coming in and the costs going out for insurance. In the last 15 to 20 years, and most recently in the last PEC agreement that, by the way, is still in effect until 2029. I don't want you to lose sight of that because some of the discourse that's going around in the community right now was based on some budgetary sheets that were put up on that screen in the last couple of weeks. And it has resulted in a town meeting member submitting a action for future town meeting. That, by the way, doesn't represent any savings for at least 10 years. But the numbers I want to put out to you today, and I'm not meaning to be argumentative to Lynn, I've worked closely with Lynn for many years, as you have. I've never seen a $5 million a month claim in my history with the Insurance Advisory Committee monthly cash flow summary sheets, unless it was a 5-week month. There are a couple of times where that does spike based on catastrophic illnesses. We can't avoid that.
Mr. Weber, you've exceeded 3 minutes. How much additional time would you need?
All right, I didn't know we were under 3 minutes today. Can you give me 1 more minute, please?
I can give-
I'll wrap
sir.
up with a closing statement.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. My closing statement is this, and I've given this before many boards and town meeting. The issue is health insurance. The health insurance costs are the most expensive in the world here in the United States of America. And the most expensive health insurance cost in the United States of America is in Massachusetts. We're fortunate for that because we have great teaching hospitals here in Massachusetts that people travel to from all over the world. So the end statement is, to wrap up my comments, is the cost of doing business is whatever the bill is. We don't want to get involved in patient-doctor relationships. And finally, this instant crisis that we're in with GLP-1 will self-correct itself on July 1st of 2026, where the numbers that were projected of 14% will realize a 7% number instead of 14%. We've dealt with 7% increases many times in the past. No fiscal cliff, no crisis with health insurance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Is there anyone else who wanted to speak? Mr. Cohen?
If I could just, I just want to, I agree with the speaker. Because sometimes I average numbers a lot, and I try to remember numbers in my head, but sometimes I'm not right. So I think what I was referring to, the $5 million a month, is that's what we pay. We wire transfer $5 million a month basically to Blue Cross. And if the claims come in higher, then we get a refund. If they come in lower, we get a refund. If they come in lower, if they come in higher, we have to pay. So the beginning in July, the total cost was 4.4 for July, 4.7 for August, 4.2 for September, 5 million for October, 4.8 million for November. So those are the numbers of the cost sheets that are given to IAC on a monthly basis. Okay, thank you.
No, I was looking for a follow-up from what Mr. Weber indicated in having you respond. Thank you.
Yeah.
The other thing is that you mentioned earlier that Blue Cross Blue Shield does a sit-down. Is this something they do every February, this February sit-down?
It's a renewal. Yeah, we do it
Is that-
every February.
What do you expect to hear from them this year compared to last year? What was the sit-down like? What do they tell you during a sit-down? What is going to happen? What can you expect based on your previous sit-downs?
Well, they go over all the numbers of the previous fiscal year, and they give you estimates, they give you costs per member, and, a lot of that information. They talk about where the costs are coming from, because they have information about where everyone lives, the different states, and, there's a lot of information that's in the renewal that they go over with us.
And then that's followed up by Mr. Brindisi. You indicated that there was some sort of March of 2025 engagement on this question about insurance costs around that drug that we're speaking of. You said that the first indications were coming in March. You indicated at a previous meeting. You indicated that earlier in the fiscal 2020, early in 2025, you had heard that this drug that we're speaking of was coming in much higher than you.
Yeah, I may have made comments that, I have been told over the course of calendar year 2025 that the GLP-1 drug is on the cent in that it's continuing to cost the town more and more, and that it was something that we were going to have to contend with. In addition to that, I'd say that, we would have had to contend with it either way. Blue Cross Blue Shield made it really easy when they said they were dropping it from the formulary, so it no longer became a subject matter for us.
I was just tracking where this came from, obviously notified in November that we had a shortfall, but I was just kind of backing out from there of how we arrived at where we were in terms of when we were noticed. So just trying to see, is there any way we can build a 28 budget where we're paying greater interest in those events, whether it's Blue Cross Blue Shield sit down or any other indications from our healthcare consultant or the actual provider that we can use as we get closer to July 1st, when it's time to start focusing on projecting out a year and building a budget. Obviously, this information's coming in. Thank you.
If no one has other questions, I have a couple. Lynn, if you could just help me out. I'm trying to simplify things here. What is the total that we're going to raise through the tax levy?
So, I'm not sure if you got that sources and uses handout, in your packet. It was part of.
It's hard to read.
Okay, so the amount that's going to be raised in taxes is $251,079,361. That is our estimated total property tax revenue.
Okay. What does that leave us in excess levy capacity?
300,000 based on 2026's tax rate setting and what we had in excess levy capacity at that time.
Okay.
And we're estimating $3 million in new growth, which is included in that 251 million.
Okay.
So that's an estimate.
Okay. So if we were to do, I'm deeply concerned about the little bit of money we're leaving in the excess levy capacity. You and I talked about this the other day. Were you able to speak with bond counsel on the impact of excess levy on our bond rating?
I was,
Okay.
yes.
What's that impact?
So you have to remember that probably every city and town in Massachusetts is at their levy capacity, other than the city of Cambridge, Boston, maybe Worcester. Usually larger cities have a lot of excess because they have huge commercial development. So we are not unlike every other town in Massachusetts when you get up to your levy limit. So bond counsel says that even though it's one of the items that the rating agencies would look at, if they don't look at it negatively, what they would do is if you've reached your levy limit and you've built up your reserve funds to a sufficient level that which we have, and that's why our rating is a AA+. If we got to our levy limit and we were at a point where we could not fund our budgets and we started to decrease those reserves, they would then look at that negatively. And that would not be a stable outlook, and they may downgrade us. Okay. So it's sort of like a balancing act, I mean, we've built up the reserves either using the levy or with free cash or other available funds. And we've gotten to a point like our general fund stabilization fund is over $15 million, which is just about 5%. It's within our financial policies, so it's a very good level. But if we started to use that to offset the budget, then the rating agencies would say, that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this year will have no impact on our
Right.
bond rating.
No.
But if we follow the trend of where the direction that we've been going in we went from 10 to 2. We were gonna go down to just about 1 million in excess levy this year.
Right, because if our costs are higher than that revenue coming in,
Yep.
which, on a normal year, I think for our levy, property tax levy to go up is based on the new growth. So I mean, that's the other thing, because new growth we've noticed is starting to go down. So we've always estimated 3 million, which has been an average over the last 10 years. But what we're seeing is it's not $5 million. It's down in 26, it was $3.3 million. So I'm estimating 3 million next year. But we did analysis of where that new growth was coming from. And 43% of it, I think, was from Red Brook and Pine Hills. And those developments are just about, winding down, yeah. So there's a concern there that, we may not, we'll have to see, are there other areas of where we can capture new growth?
Yes, I agree with that. But I'm concerned that if we continue to follow this trend, we see less growth, we see increased costs. We're going to be talking about
Right, I mean, we have
eating
to
the rest
look
of that
at,
excess levy at some point in time, unless we take measures to cut
reduce
costs.
taxes.
And so, you mentioned that, if revenue outpaces costs, we're running into a problem. If, when a family or a business, is faced with costs that exceed the revenue that they're bringing in, they can't make money appear out of thin air, like we can through something like a Prop 2.5 override. And so I think it's unfair to continue to ask the taxpayer to bear the brunt of this. I'd like to see us be more fiscally conservative with the funds that we're entrusted with. So I'd like to see a version of the budget. I just did some quick math here. So if we reduced the proposed budget that we've seen here today by 1%, if we add that savings, which is about 2.5 million, to the existing 300,000 that will be remaining in excess levy, we'd be at about $2.8 million in excess levy capacity. If we reduced it by only 0.75% of 0.75% reduction, adding to the existing 300,000, it would be about $2.1 million. I'm much more comfortable seeing that level of excess capacity. I know we have stabilization accounts that will help us get through an unforeseen cost, but as you said, if we reduce our excess levy and then we start eating into those accounts, that's when the bond companies are gonna start downgrading our rating, which means for the taxpayer that you're getting less bang for your buck. So when we borrow, it costs you more in interest, right? So we're going towards a situation where we're telling you that we're gonna tax you to the absolute max that we can. And for every dollar we borrow on your behalf, you're gonna be paying more in interest. And I don't like that scenario at all. So I'm gonna make a motion here today, that I'd like to see a budget option at our next meeting on Tuesday that reduces the tax levy raise by 1%.
So that's $2 million, right?
Yeah, it'd probably be approximately $2.5 million. So I'm prepared to make that motion. And so move.
Second.
Mr. Quintal seconds my motion. Is there discussion? Mr. Canty?
So your proposed reduction, that's just an across the board 1.1%?
Yeah, I would leave the town manager to work with his department heads and to communicate with his counterparts in the schools to determine how they would effectuate that. I'd rather not get into the nitty gritty of directing how that would play out.
And if this motion were to succeed, this would be presented as an alternative. So it'd be the town manager's recommended budget as an option for us to approve. And then this 1% lower budget as a secondary option? Or are you looking for this to be the main presentation to us on Tuesday?
I'm open to hearing feedback from my colleagues on that. Mr. Cohen?
I think it would be an option. I'd like to, obviously, we would look at the numbers after staff takes a look at it and provides it. It would just be one of the options that we're looking at. Obviously, I've been writing down here the different ways that we could mitigate this and the funds that are available, from free cash to roads to levies to cuts to other revenue sources. So it would be very helpful that if we meet on Tuesday, that we're looking at options.
I personally, if it's an option to look at, doesn't hurt to look at it. But I would be very curious to know how a 1% reduction would play out across the budget and what that would mean to the departments and the services that they deliver. So if it's presented as an option, that's fine.
Sure.
I would not want it to be the only option we're presenting.
Sure. Ms. Iaquinto?
Yeah, I like the idea of looking at that as an option as well. And I'm glad, Mr. Golden, that you brought up this, the excess levy capacity issue, because it's something I've been struggling with a little bit as I've been looking at these numbers. And just, just to play devil's advocate, the reason for the lower, you could make an argument for a lower excess levy capacity, because it does preserve some flexibility while acknowledging that the town, the reality of the cost, the recurring costs of running the town. We should preserve some, but we shouldn't hoard it. There are just like a lot of pros and cons to both sides. I can see arguments for both sides, but I do struggle with that a number at that low level. So I think looking at an option would be really interesting. The other thing that I was thinking about as an exercise was what would it look like if we had a level funded budget versus a level service budget. I think that would be an interesting exercise to go through. It'd be painful to say the least, and that's not something I would expect for Tuesday night, but it's just another, if we're really serious about thinking about cutting costs, it might be an interesting exercise at some point to go through.
I agree with the exercise statement. I think it would be challenging for them to prepare a third budget.
No, I
by
would never
Tuesday.
expect that,
No,
but
I know
I
you
was just trying to think of different
Yeah.
options as I
Yeah.
was looking at this budget and,
Yeah.
getting more and more nauseous as I looked at it.
No,
that,
I hear you.
that There could be an interesting exercise to go through.
Yeah. Mr. Quintel?
Yeah, I'll support looking at options. I will not support using that much of the levy today, tomorrow, with any option. 300,000 is just way too close for the tire to hit. The message for the state is already going to be a couple tough years. So by us knowing that, then we should be fiscally prudent. And, it's always go and go and go and go. You know what? I got a thing today from one of the residents. This is just one. But it's making me speak a little more tonight. Where does he go? He says, Dick, I certainly do not have the answer, but my tax bill went up $360 a quarter. It's getting very difficult to live in Plymouth. We all campaign, we all come back to this table, and we hear the same thing. We heard from so many residents. We hear we need economic development, but yet we're so wrapped up in policies. And may I say, policies that don't even pass. And I hate to be the one always doing this, but let's get to doing the business of the town and pay attention here. Let's give staff some direction of where we should be going. Like I said, I'll never support that budget using that much of the levy. It's time to make some cuts. I'll leave it up to staff to make some. I did have a brief conversation with Mr. Fernandez yesterday, and he said that the Chapter 70 money was going to go untouched, he believes. I mean, he doesn't have a crystal ball either, but I'd say he's got a pretty good handle what's going on. And the rest of it, They're not expecting to come in and tell us we're gonna get more. So, knowing these factors are on the horizon, I can't sit here as I have many years and say that, there'd be more. And I'm worried about this building, the maintenance of this building. I want to see where that money is going to be appropriated. If it's free cash, I mean, I do have some priorities I want to see done. One of them is taking care of this building. The town couldn't move fast enough to grab it and do a beautiful job, but let's start maintaining it. Start the paint's peeling, the tiles are coming off the roof, and to no one's blame. But these are the things on my mind. So I'm just not comfortable with that least amount in the levy. And I think we need to make some more cuts and see what we can do. That's just my spiel.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes, I believe we're going to have to begin some exercises, not only to address this issue that was before us, but also when we look at 2028. I think that all the dashboard lights are indicating that we have to focus our attention on that. And we've talked about different things about maybe looking at when we begin the budget building process, what type of time will we have to analyze the budget in terms of town meetings and when they happen, when FinCom meets. FinCom's here tonight. They're going to start a process that they have to meet deadlines. So I think looking at our deadlines, opening up discussions of how long we'll be able to look at the budget and, forecasting a little future into the future. I think these are all things that are exercises. Ms. Quinto indicated an exercise that we don't have time to see that on Tuesday, but it's something that we should start to indicate to staff that we would like to see that as part of the equation for the next fiscal year, so that we have more options. So Mr. Quinto talked about, and I know Mr. Golden talked about the importance of economic development. Kevin and Deb have all talked about it. And I think that if we are going to look for new growth, that new growth has to come with zoning changes. Zoning changes that are focused on creating a local sustainable economy, focusing on our small businesses, light industrial, staying away from different types of commercial properties, such as activities such as highway commercial that are driving up the cost of services. So really, when it's interesting, as things wind down at Pine Hills in Red Brook, the reason why they were able to be revenue-driven opportunities for the town and limited on their cost of services is because Mr. Quinto was here, and many others were here at the time back in the late 90s and 2000s, early 2000s, when we got into conversations at town meeting about how we were going to drive some revenue, but everybody was afraid of the cost of services. So those OSMIDs were designed around deriving revenue with zoning changes, and we ran exercises to see how that was going to be beneficial to the town of Plymouth. We didn't want Red Brook or Pine Hills to hurt us. We had learned from the 1970s and 80s when you have residential growth that is sprawling in a manner that's driving up the cost of services. So we have our work cut out for us in terms of doing the business, but I have a lot of confidence in this board, in this town, and staff that we can take on multiple conversations at the same time. That's our job. So look forward to working with people on that.
I'll go Ms. Quinto, then Mr. Canty.
Yeah, I agree, Mr. Cohen. And I know that the town is already working on looking at different options for cost management for the next budget cycle too. So, but I think the only other thing I want to say about that is I really think we need to flip the narrative on how we think about building the budget and think about how we negotiate on behalf of the taxpayers and just really make them our main audience. Whenever we're making decisions, they're tough decisions, but we need to make sure that we're mindful that we're working for the taxpayers and that any decisions we make should be in the taxpayers' best interests.
I agree with Mr. Cohen that we are a board that is capable of handling multiple conversations at once, and I believe that discussing and passing policies is the business of the town, as well as talking about our budget. But in terms of, I would make a request from Ms. Barrett as well when we're talking about the budget on Tuesday. If we could add information about, and I can email this to you so that you have it in writing. But I would like to know if we were to cut $10,000 or $100,000 or $1 million, for each of those, what would the effect be on the average tax bill? And then I would like to know if we were to look to reduce the increase to the average tax bill, because you said earlier is about 325, assuming no value is added, which we know it will be. If we wanted to reduce that increase by $100 per average tax bill, what would we have to cut from the budget in order to achieve that? Because I will say that generally, I think, I'm interested in seeing how the numbers play out, but generally, I think a percentage decrease from a budget is often precarious to the operations of a given department. So how a 1% would play out over the meets and bounds of the budget in the different divisions and departments would give me significant pause. And I think that the fiscal realities that the community is dealing with are things that we must confront whether we would like them to or not. And the services that the town is delivering to residents, we may not each depend on all of them, but someone does in the community depend on all of our services. And I think that it's important to keep that in mind as well as we go forward. I would also add, as we heard earlier, although I understand concerns about the levy decreasing, as Lynn said, most other communities are at their levy limit, and that it's actually better for our levy to take money from the levy to pay our bills than it is stabilization for our bond rating as well, which are important points to highlight, because I know a lot of people are concerned about, over the last couple of years, the reduction in the levy over time. But having an excess levy like we did was in some ways a luxury for as long as we had it, but was also, in my opinion, not the best policy for us to have, because we had a number of costs in the town that were unaddressed for years that got more expensive because we didn't have the money going towards paying them. For instance, the most hot button issue of late in regards to that is we got a water intrusion study for Memorial Hall in 2011 and did nothing substantive about it and let water continue to intrude for now 15 years. I would say that if we had had more money, because if you had all those millions of dollars in your budget every year over those years, you could pay bills sooner, you could complete projects sooner, and you could reduce costs for residents sooner over time and by a significant margin over time. So that is another component of this to keep in mind that I will be watching closely. But I would make those requests, and I'm happy to put those in writing for you, Ms. Barrett.
Mr. Quinville?
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying I'm not in favor of raising taxes. I'm not asking anybody to deduct anything. What I'm saying is let's not tax people to the max. Just to be clear, there's all kind of ways of skirting around it, but that's what this is coming down to. Live within your budget or not. So you can live within the budget this year, or you're gonna definitely live within it next year, because then after that's an override. So I don't see anybody in this room gonna raise their hand for that.
Mr. Cohen?
I know we're in the discussion on the motion, but Mr. Canty and Dickey bring up some very good points. I don't want it to seem as if we're kicking the can down the road. That has been mentioned many times over the years, and as if you've been in Plymouth long enough, Plymouth is a bare bone operation. And if we are going to hear this scenario of a possible cut, we want to know, and we're going to be giving it to the pleasure of the town manager to look at his different departments and prioritize that event, because obviously different budgets, if you cut dramatically from, let's say, DPW, and you put off some very important things, and when you come back to addressing that issues in the future, and it's going to cost us even more money to address those issues. So, when you start to cut into the scope of responsibilities of a department, it can come back to haunt us that kicking of that action of kicking the can can haunt us in higher and higher cost. So we just want to be, we have professional staff, we have a town manager, they're going to start to look and prioritize the departments. I want them to be sensitive when they look at the departments, because there are some departments that are controlling costs that we want to pay attention to. And there are other departments that could be a little bit more aggressive in terms of how they meet that, inquiry and request and partnership with the town manager to come to something that we can look at and make firmer decisions. Thank you.
Mr. Quintel?
Another thing that comes to my mind and why I bring up not using all that levy is because we have 11 CBA agreements opening up in January. And how do you go to the workforce? And I've been here enough times where we've done it in the past, and say there's no money for raises for the next 3 years, but their taxes are going up, the price of food's going up. So it's not just the levy, but if it's not there, then where are we gonna get the money? So like you said, we can kick the can down the road, or we can be as conservative as we can. Hopefully we have enough to make everyone happy. But if not, it's better than nothing. So unless something changes, and it very well could, and I'd welcome that, trust me. But, maybe we ought to focus in the future, the very near future, as how we do some zoning changes and how we do some economic development in the right areas instead of lip service. That's the issue. It's not whoever's sitting at this table. I mean, we have to deal with it, whoever's sitting here. But let's make out a plan or something moving forward. We got a brochure last week in our packet on some kind of battery storage unit and so on and so forth on the Old Tech site. I'm gonna reach out to them and get all the information and bring it back here. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but you know what? At least I'm gonna look at it and bring it before the town and let the town decide. If the town don't want it, okay, I did my work. On to the next thing. And that's the way I look at it. I can only tell you from my work experience. If we don't have money, we've already cut hours because the economy's slowing a little bit. Our paychecks just don't go in the bank every week. We have to actually earn that. There's things we have no control over, and I don't blame this on anybody. This is a cycle we're gonna go through. But I've been through enough of these cycles, and some way worse than this one. This is an easy one. I mean, we've been in the middle of a budget. I think it was 2005, when we had the 9C cuts. We had to take out $5 million in the middle of the operating year. So that's an issue. So I'd rather be a little more conservative here and have a little bit extra for everything, or in case we have another rainy day. And I know we have funds, but we never use them, so, and that's okay too. But, I know what's coming. I know that the groups are gonna be out there next year, and we need to, this isn't gonna go away on its own.
Ms. Iaquinto?
Yeah, I think, clearly there are really good, strong strategic arguments for different levels of excess capacity, excess levy capacity, whether it should be lower, whether it should be higher, what are the implications, what are the benefits. I think it's great that we're going to have two different options to look at to see how that might play out, so that we really can understand what that looks like on the ground. Because it's easy for us to sit here and talk about it and, as a philosophically what we would like to see and not see. But so I'm really looking forward to that. The other thing that I'm really mindful of is that I really don't want us to make a knee-jerk reaction to, for something that, to solve like an immediate, something that we see as an immediate crisis today. That will have long-term implications, that will come back to bite us, even if it's 10 years down the road. We should be making those decisions today, even if we're not going to see, significant cost savings immediately. Look at the long-term impact of some of the decisions we're making. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do that on Tuesday night too, as we look at the two different options, just to make sure that we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and that we're making some sound fiscally responsible decisions about which way to go. But I'm looking forward to the exercise of comparing the two options.
Mr. Canty?
piggybacking off what Ms. Iaquinto just mentioned, I mean, historically, Plymouth has done a bad job of looking past the current problem towards problems down the road and getting out ahead of them. And I think people have expressed a desire of late for that to stop and for us to focus on medium and long-term planning, which achieves better results over a longer time frame than going from individual crisis to individual crisis does. Unfortunately, we do not have the luxury of just focusing on medium and long-term issues. We must also grapple responsibly with the issues immediately before us. But I think it is important to weigh those medium and long-term priorities, because I think part of the reason we're where we are is because our predecessors didn't weigh it as much as I would have liked them to. Thank you.
Mr. Cohen?
And just in going through this experience where we're getting this information 3 weeks ago, it's changing 2 weeks ago, it makes me think about the budget process and looking back and seeing how we got to where we were and then looking forward to 28 and seeing how we can change things differently to build a budget, recognizing that we're going to be facing some challenges. So obviously, I think we're going to address the issue at hand, but we still need to look forward at 28. And we got to look back and see how we're doing things and could we do things differently, whether it's building a budget or getting ready for town meeting, in terms of the time allotted to analyze the situation and discuss it.
All right. I want to say I share some of the concerns that Mr. Weber brought up during his public comment. I've spoken with some other members of the workforce here, Butch Machado, other folks as well. I think a 1% reduction can be achieved without impacting the workforce or considerably impacting the quality of services that we provide to our residents. I think we can keep the promises that we've made to the hardworking men and women who do the work here in town, while still being fiscally responsible and not placing all of the burden on tax-paying citizens here. We talked about economic development. If I'm a businessman and I'm looking to open up shop somewhere, am I going to look at a community like Plymouth where suddenly we're being taxed to the max, and we have high values, we have high, well, I wouldn't say we have high tax rate. We're probably in the middle in terms of the actual rate per $1,000. But if we have high value real estate in the community, if I look at between here and a place like Kingston where they have lower values, a similar tax rate, they're not providing the same level of service that the town of Plymouth is. At the end of the day, as a business person, I don't care necessarily what the services are. I care about what's my bottom line going to be. We have a ton of businesses that are open right on the town line between Kingston and Plymouth. There are people from Plymouth going up there all the time to do business. If we want people to come here to open up shop, we have to make sure that we're not telling them we're going to squeeze you for every penny that we can get out of you. I think a 1% reduction is reasonable, and I hope that my colleagues will support it. It sounds like we have some general support. To assuage Mr. Canty's fears, I think I did frame it as an option. I will just amend my motion to be safe and say that I'd like to see an option presented for a 1% reduction. And Mr. Quinto, would you maintain your second? Excellent.
Yes.
Does that work for you, Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Excellent. Any further discussion on the issue? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the roll. Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Quinto?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Ms. Iaquinto?
Yes.
And myself, yes. It is unanimous. Okay, so, Mr. Brindisi, I think that means we're still not going to adopt your budget tonight, which I think means that we'll also postpone administrative notes 1 through 6 until we see which of the two budgets we will adopt. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, we'll move on in the agenda then, skipping administrative notes. As promised on our very late Tuesday night, I will open things up to the board for discussion on new business. Mr. Cohen?
We have an upcoming, well, it might be old business. Maybe I'll wait for old business.
You're free to do so. Any letters?
One thing on the letters, we keep getting these letters from the local cable provider. Have we, and I know they're addressed to the town. I was wondering if those, maybe we can get an update in the future on these letters that are coming in from local cable providers. I'm just wondering how the town was responding to that.
Sure. We received a number of letters from folks who didn't have the opportunity to give public comment at our last meeting. I'm going to submit them as part of the record here tonight so that folks can see them when we approve our minutes. Jade, were you copied on those? Excellent. Could you just add them to our minutes in the future so that the public can see them?
Yes, the minutes for last week's meeting, do you want that too? Minutes for tonight's meeting.
Ooh, that's a great question.
Tuesday.
Probably Tuesday. Yeah.
Well,
Thank you. All right. Any other letters? Old business?
We're going to meet with the planning board. They just finished up one of their, well, it's not the final, but close to their final last meeting with their consultant. Town of Plymouth paid nearly $500,000 for a consultant to come up with a master plan. Over the last year, they've been working on this master plan. They're finalizing it. They'll be meeting with us and having a joint discussion. And I think as we talk about future revenue vehicles, we should be using that master plan as guidance on how we're going to build future revenue opportunities for the town. I do believe that master plan should have a special addendum that includes the top 10 zoning changes you'd have to do to make that master plan a reality. I know it's great when people come in with their PowerPoints and grab the microphone and say, I got an idea. But we just paid $500,000 for this master planning process. We need to take advantage of every penny invested in that master planning process. I think a good investment will be advocating for an examination of the master plan, looking at possible zoning changes at town meeting to make the master plan a reality. So I just wanted to point that out, that as we get ready for that meeting, we should probably, think about that as a committee so that we have a coordinated kind of idea going out to the planning board when we meet with them.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Mr. Canty is our designee to the, I guess you guys are now the Comprehensive Plan Committee?
We haven't changed the name of the committee, just the plan. So I guess we're the master plan committee in charge of the comprehensive plan.
Would you mind bringing that suggestion back to the committee?
Yes, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Other old business? Mr. Canty?
I would, just because Kingston was brought up. They're a town that apparently in fiscal year '26, their excess levy capacity is $9,607. So, and that's down from fiscal year '25, where they had $898,010. So I understand the consternation about the excess levy because we live in a town where we used to have the luxury of a significant cushion there. But I think the communities surrounding us are in a worse situation than we are in that regard. And that if we're using the money from the levy smartly to pay for things that are needed, that could be a value, even though it is obviously a cost to residents. But I just wanted to put that forth.
Does that list their total levy?
Their maximum allowable levy appears to be $46,683,223. So
So,
$46,683,223.
so less than 1/6 of Well, approximately a sixth of ours.
approximately.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, I mean,
I mean, they're smaller and,
they're in rough shape. Rougher shape than us, I suppose.
yeah, the Kingston collection continues to exist
That it does.
in its current state.
Other business? Other old business? All right. Our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, January 13th. It's a joint meeting with the Advisory and Finance Committee, as well as the School Committee. Thank the folks who came out tonight on a Friday, especially our Advisory and Finance Committee Chairman, his second Vice Chair, a few of their committee members, and of course, as always, the members of the public. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Oh, sorry.
I'm going to give it to Ms. Iaquinto. Is there a
thank you.
second?
Second,
Mr. Canty seconds. Any discussion? Ms. Iaquinto?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
yes.
Mr. Quintel?
Yes.
Mr. Cohan?
Yes.
And myself, yes. We're adjourned. Have a good weekend, folks.